Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're about to take a deep dive into some reflections on Romans 8.28.
Oh, yeah.
You know the one, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose.
Mm-hmm.
We've all thought about this one a lot, right?
Oh, absolutely.
What do we do with this verse?
Yeah, it's one of those verses that brings a lot of hope, but also can be really difficult to reconcile with like our own experience, especially when, life is hard.
Yeah.
The author of the reflection that we're going to be looking at today actually starts off by saying that they felt like a victim of this verse for a long time.
Oh, wow. So they felt like almost hurt by it.
Yeah.
Like it was being used against them.
Yeah, and I really appreciate their vulnerability in sharing that struggle because I think it's okay to question these things and wrestle with them.
Right.
And it's in that wrestling that we can find some growth.
Yeah, totally. So how did they move beyond feeling like a victim of the verse? Do they find some secret formula to make life perfect?
Not exactly, but they had a pretty significant shift in perspective.
What?
Instead of approaching the verse as a victim, they chose to see themselves as a beneficiary.
Okay, I like that. I'm intrigued. Tell me more about that shift.
So it starts with recognizing that God is for us, not against us.
Okay.
And even when things are hard, even when we don't understand, we can trust that he's at work.
Right.
And that he wants good for us.
I see how that could change things. But what about all the pain and suffering in the world? How does that fit into this idea of God working for good?
Well, the author takes us back to the beginning,
Okay.
to Genesis.
Okay.
And they point out that God created a perfect world,
Right.
a world full of harmony, but sin messed that up.
Yeah, the classic Adam and Eve story.
Yeah.
You know how that goes.
Yeah, so what's that got to do with Romans 8.28?
Yeah.
Well, the author highlights that God didn't abandon Adam and Eve even after they sinned.
Right.
He provided for them. He made them clothes to cover their nakedness.
I'd never thought about it like that before. It's a simple act. But you're right, it does show God's character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So even in the midst of brokenness, God is still working for our good.
It's a glimmer of hope.
Exactly. And that hope goes beyond just us as individuals.
Okay.
And that's where the author uses the analogy of a circle.
Okay, I love a good analogy, so tell me about the circle.
Okay, so picture yourself at the center of the circle, and we tend to think that Romans 8.28 is just about us,
Right.
our good God making things work out for us.
Right, my little bubble.
Yeah, but God's work is so much bigger than that.
So it's not just me.
No.
There's more.
God's purpose is bigger than our little circle. He's working in countless lives.
Wow.
And orchestrating events on a grander scale that we might never understand.
That's overwhelming.
It is, but it's also pretty amazing.
Yeah, and how can we even begin to understand a plan that big?
Well, I think that's where we just have to have awe and wonder.
Okay.
We're dealing with a God who's bigger than us, wiser than us, and even when we don't understand, we can trust that he's working everything out for good,
Hey.
even when it doesn't feel like it. Yeah, it can definitely be overwhelming.
It is.
But there's also something kind of freeing about realizing we don't have to be in control.
Right.
Just trusting in God's plan.
I'm getting that.
Yeah.
So we've talked about being a beneficiary, not a victim.
Yeah.
And this idea that God's plan is way bigger than us.
Right.
What else did the author say about understanding Romans 8.28?
They brought up the idea of a refinement process.
Oh, yeah. I've heard that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it just sounds like something people say.
Mm-hmm.
God is just using this to refine you.
Yeah.
But that's easier said than done.
Oh, definitely. It's not about pretending that things are okay when they're not.
Right.
But the author used an analogy to explain this refinement process.
Okay. I love a good analogy, so let's hear it.
Okay. So imagine a farmer.
Okay.
They patiently take care of their crops.
Okay.
Planting the seeds, watering them, waiting for them to grow. Then they harvest and refine the grain.
So we're like the crops, and God is the farmer.
Yeah, he's carefully helping us to grow.
Mm-hmm.
And just like with farming, God's timing might not always be the same as ours.
Right.
There are different seasons, some for growing, some for waiting, and some for refining.
Okay.
And each of those seasons is important for shaping us.
That makes sense. I don't need to have it all figured out. God is working even when I don't see it.
Right. It all comes down to faith.
Yeah.
Trusting God even when we can't see what he's doing.
So we've got this shift in perspective.
Yeah.
God's bigger plan and this process of refinement. What's the good that God is working towards?
Well, the author gets pretty deep here.
Okay.
They say the best thing about all things working together for good is that God is with us.
Oh, wow.
They use the word Immanuel.
God with us.
Yeah, so it's not about getting what we want.
Okay.
It's not about being perfect.
Yeah.
It's about experiencing God.
And when we get that, everything changes.
It really does. We don't have to earn his favor. We can just rest in the fact that he's always with us.
That's comforting, especially when we're going through those tough times.
And the best part is God's presence is a gift.
Right.
It's given to us through Jesus.
Like when Jesus said, I am with you always to the very end of the age.
Yes, that's it.
There's so much peace in knowing that
It is the heart of the gospel.
God with us.
That's the ultimate good.
It's available to us right now.
Right now.
But knowing about it and experiencing it are two different things.
Yeah.
So how can we be more aware of God's presence in our everyday lives?
That's the big question. And it's something we all struggle with.
Yeah.
There's no easy answer, but there are some things that can help us.
Okay, what are they?
Well, spending time in the Bible is essential.
Right.
That's where we hear God's voice.
Yeah, like tuning into God amidst all the other noise.
Exactly. And prayer is also vital.
Right.
But not just saying the same words over and over.
Right.
Really talking to God. Sharing our joys and sorrows.
Just being real with Him.
Yeah, just being with Him.
And don't forget about community.
Yes, that's important.
Being around other believers.
Yeah, people who can encourage us.
Right, and remind us about God.
Exactly. And sometimes like the simple things that remind us of God, like nature
Yeah.
or music.
Yeah.
Or just being grateful for what we have.
Like little glimpses of God in our everyday lives.
Exactly. It's about training ourselves to see Him everywhere.
That's good. I'm starting to see things differently.
That's great.
More aware of God.
And I think that's what Romans 8.28 is all about.
Yeah.
It's about letting that verse change our perspective.
We've talked about a lot the victim and beneficiary mindsets,
Yeah.
God's plan, the refinement process, and God with us.
Yeah, we have.
Anything else from the author?
There's one more thing.
Okay.
They talked about how this new perspective on Romans 8.28 can change how we see our problems.
Okay. That's interesting. Tell me more.
They said when we look at our problems and remember that God is with us,
Yeah.
we don't see them as roadblocks or punishments, but as opportunities to grow closer to God.
That's a big shift.
It is.
But I can see how it would change things.
Instead of fighting against our problems, we can lean into them,
Yeah.
knowing that God is with us
Yeah.
and that He's using them for good.
It's like what Paul said about boasting in his weaknesses.
Yes.
Because God's power was made perfect in those moments.
Exactly. God isn't scared of our mess.
Right.
He's not afraid of our pain.
He's right there with us.
He is, and He offers us His presence to comfort us.
Yeah. This is making me think about my own problems.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to ask, why me?
Yeah.
But focusing on God changes everything.
It does. We're not denying the pain,
Right.
but we're holding on to the truth that God is with us.
Wow, this has been a lot to take in.
It has.
I need to think about all this.
Me too. It's a perspective that takes time to understand and apply to our lives, but it's a perspective that can change everything about how we live and experience our faith.
This idea of Immanuel, God with us, it's beautiful, but I'm still wrestling with it a bit.
Yeah.
How do I actually experience God's presence, especially when things are tough?
I think a lot of people feel that tension. We have this promise of God being with us, but it's not always easy to feel.
Right.
The author doesn't give us easy answers, but they do give us some things to remember.
Okay, I'm listening.
The main thing is remembering that even when we feel alone, God is there.
Okay.
Just like He was with Adam and Eve in their mess, He's with us in ours.
So even if I don't feel it, I can trust that He's there.
Exactly. And we build that trust through prayer, through reading the Bible and being with other Christians.
Yeah, those things help us to see Him.
Right. And remember, experiencing God is a journey, not a destination.
Yeah.
Like the farmer God is patient with us.
Yeah.
There are seasons for growing, for waiting, for refining.
Right.
And they all bring us closer to Him.
So it's not about getting what I want.
No.
It's about seeing God in everything.
Yes. The good, the bad, and the in-between.
That's a good way to put it.
It means that even the hard things can show us God's love and grace.
Like those hard things are pushing us towards God.
Exactly. And in those times, we often find strength we didn't know we had.
Yeah, because it's not our strength.
It's God's strength working through us.
This has been such a good deep dive.
It has.
It's made me think about Romans 8.28 in a whole new way.
I'm glad to hear that. It's a verse that keeps on giving.
It really does. So we've talked about a lot today.
We have.
Tough questions, big truths, and a new way of seeing how God works in our lives.
And hopefully a new sense of hope.
Yes, even when things are hard, God is with us.
He is, and He's working everything out for our good.
And that good is knowing Him.
Yes.
So as you go about your week, think about this. How does this new understanding of Romans 8.28 and this idea of Immanuel change how you see your life and your relationship with God?
That's a good question.
Keep exploring, keep seeking, and keep trusting. Until next time, happy diving.